Well, hi everyone. My name is Vincent. I'm a co-organizer with Aaron over here for OKC WebDevs. I'm going to be doing a talk today about a little bit different subjects. So normally we do a lot of stuff about tech or design or industry standard stuff, but today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. We're going to be talking about how honestly the industry itself is affecting developers and really just people in software in general. Now a lot of these topics are covered in every career, but we kind of have to have a context about where we are. So everything related to this is software. So today I will be doing that talk with Matt Woodruff here. I'll let him introduce himself.
How's it going? I'm Matt Woodruff. I've been developing software for going on my 5th year. I currently work at RFX Solutions, and that's pretty much it.
Well, cool. This talk is about development as a career, not as a personality. That seems like a very weird way to describe something, but I think all of us who have worked in software have kind of experienced a mode where you kind of have that blend where your personal life and your work life kind of they interchange, and you don't really have a solid line. And there's a difference between enjoying what you do and then doing that outside of work, and then now your work is your personality, and that is everything. It's all consuming. Whether that's you have that example of that's your work life, 'cause you just live there all the time. Or this is I have my phone on me and it's always going to call, and you kind of have those moments where if it rings, you're is it work? So this sort of feeling is not uncommon. There's a quote that I want to start off with that I really like. It's happiness is not a matter of intensity, but of balance, order, rhythm, and harmony. And work-life balance is a buzzword that everyone's using nowadays, with more people working from home because of COVID and just technology in general making it more accessible for us to kind of work from home. And that quite literally brings your work into your house. And so now that line is even more blurred. And in our industry, intensity and passion are often misused by organizations and companies because now they know we can get more productivity out of these individuals because they are passionate about it. And large companies have made it a standard, like Google and Apple and a bunch of other places that have campus life, that further emphasizes that if we keep them on campus, then we can get more work out of them because they don't see the difference between their work life and their personal life anymore. So, and we're also a product of that intensity misuse, on our own. We have to own that, because if you don't know that you're doing it, then you kind of feed into it even more and more. So this quote has always been really good to me because of people I meet, all of the people here. One of the reasons why I've gotten into organizing these talks is because that intensity is everywhere. So that being said, I'm going to start off with setting boundaries. This is probably the most no-brainer thing to do, but everyone kind of glosses over it. And there's a lot of bullet points on here that I'll kind of just roughly go over. But one of the things about setting boundaries is it kind of helps you personally organize how you're going to do everything in your life, right? But specifically when it comes to your job, whether you are about to look for a new job and you're trying to, figure out if it's a good fit for you, because it's a bi-directional. Company culture isn't just are you going to work with my team? It's, are you going to work with my life? And you do that when the first things is establishing your hours, and that can be very difficult. If you have a very busy personal life, if you have a family, if you have a side business you're trying to build or a passion that you're trying to grow, you have to know your own hours. And the most important thing about knowing your hours is that when situations come up to you that fall outside that hours, then you don't have to have that conversation with yourself. Can I do this? Because you've already done that. You've said, I don't really want to do this outside of that. And it should turn into a conversation at that point. That's not to say that you have to say to your boss, no, I'm not going to work those every single time. But knowing your own hours is important because then you can establish a rhythm with what you're supposed to be doing and kind of lessening that bleed. Knowing your job responsibilities well is difficult. I'm a contractor, so my job responsibilities change every time I have a new contract. But this one was actually told to me really early in my career, because when you learn your job responsibilities, you can actually set personal goals in your life, specifically at your job. And when someone, or whether it's management or another project, or even something in your personal life starts to take over your responsibilities, you can then go, is this going to be my new responsibility, right? An example of that is I'm sure everyone, if you're not one of these people, but if someone knows of that person at your job that does everything, how do I do this? Oh, that person over there knows how to do this. Oh, this is broken. Who could fix this for us? That person can do it. That jack of all trades did not start off as a jack of all trades. They were a person that kept getting more and more responsibilities, and it kept growing and getting bigger and bigger. And ultimately, what that leads to is a person that, first off, from a company standpoint, they have all the cards, and that's scary. Because if that person leaves, you lose all those cards. But then it also means your responsibilities are growing to an overwhelming standpoint that it's not healthy, realistically. Even if you're compensated really well. Like, we offset, I'm making more money, so I'll do more things, but to what extent? There's only 24 hours in a day, and there's only so many days, that you can work that much without, affecting your health. So knowing your responsibilities is a really easy way to kind of figure out, can I do this? Should I do this? And then how can I better my life with those new responsibilities? So there's a few other ones on here that I'll kind of gloss over. Clear and agreed upon priorities and tasks is difficult, but if someone goes up to you and says, I need you to do X, Y, Z, a practice that was told to me that I really love is, if you have already said these are the things that I can do, and you've said that this fits within my work schedule, my responsibilities, I can do this, then simply go, okay, well, explain to them what your current responsibilities are and ask them to deprioritize one of them, so that way you can then work on the new task that's given to you. That will help this individual who is telling you that they need you to do this new task, that you have other priorities, and then put the responsibility on them to deprioritize something else, that you are not going to just fit that in your schedule, because then you start to go outside your work hours and you start to work a little bit more and do more, and then who knows that you may even slack on the other things that you already had prior agreements on. So that practice is really important. Workload discussion versus mandates, those are usually something you have with your team manager or a team lead, or if you were into management, vice versa, have that with your team members, because that will actually help you to kind of have a discussion and say, hey, what are your priorities? What are your goals? Mandates aren't as common anymore because I feel like work culture is getting a lot better in software, but they still happen. And those are usually like, you have to work or you're fired. Or you're coming in, it's the Rombergs of office space. Like, we're gonna need you to come in on the weekends. So those don't typically happen as much anymore, but they still can. The next one is more of just a general topic. Salary life does not mean 50+ hour weeks. This is a misconception. I will say this is the reason why I decided to become a contractor. I worked at a company, and it doesn't matter what the name was because it's a very common thing, but worked at a company where I worked 50+ hour weeks for about 3 months straight. And with the promise that something was going to get done about that. And I wanted to, help my coworkers out. I wanted to make sure all this was, getting done. I cared about my company, the product that I was building. I have good work ethics. But this was always thrown around at me. It's like, your salary, you don't really have a choice in the matter. And that's not true. Salary means that you are getting paid a fixed amount of money to do a job. It does not mean they own you and your personal life. So this is one of those topics that if you feel that this is the commonality and you're not wanting to do that you have control over that. And this is one of those standards that are in the industry, realistically, just in general, that is really affecting a lot of people. And the campus life I mentioned earlier is really emphasizing that, because you may clock in at 8 and then you're supposed to clock out at 5, but then it's 7:30 and you're like, man, I have to get dinner and then come back to my computer. Well, that's not necessarily true. You can clock out, that work will still be there tomorrow, no matter whose importance they're putting that on you. So this is one of those things that I always ask in an interview is just, okay, well, what's the standard week look like? Is it a 40-hour week? Do you guys have crunch time? Ask a few keywords to figure out how common that issue is, because if it's every so often and you're okay with that, then you're good to go. But if you're starting to get a feeling that that's an every week sort of thing, or in my case, multiple back-to-back months, it may not be the right fit. This last one might trigger a few people, especially if you're in management or you own your own company. But I said this earlier, but I'm a contractor. So I work on a lot of jobs frequently and often. And some of these things I hear from everyone here, and then also just through my own experience. But you have to kind of see beyond company culture. And what that means is that it's okay to fit with the company and like their product and like the people you work for. But you also have to make sure that you realize that this is also a job. And in the end, I want to kind of go home and have my own personal life. And one of those things that kind of gets people in are the perks. And so that's the first one. Seeing past job perks is really hard because it's usually things that we want. That's why they're perks. Company laptops, paid subscriptions, flexible time off. Those are the kinds of things that sound great up front, but a laptop usually means you are now taking your work home with you. And that means that you're going to probably do something with it. For my case, I was a DBA. I got calls at 2 a.m. when the server went down. And I was, in the middle of the night trying to bring something back up, chugging coffee, trying to get stuff done. Flexible time off sounds great until you have to realize that now you have to talk to your employer and give them justifications on why you want time off when you don't have to do that. Like, I want time off. I'm not saying you have to, do it the day before, but you have to have that conversation, and it can be kind of uncomfortable, and that gives you pressure on maybe I shouldn't take that time off, and then you're starting to put it more and more away. Statistics have shown that flexible time off, the reason why companies offer it is because in the end, employees take less time off because of that pressure that is exhumed on them from the company. And so when it comes to these certain perks, it's difficult to go, well, why do I have these? And it's okay to ask those things in either your interview or to your company. Competitor competition or competitor contention is a really cool one because it's one of those things that everyone innately has a competitive side. But what happens is that if you have a company and they immediately create this entity that you are competitive against, that's either first to market sort of competitor, meaning like this person right here, I've worked for a pharmaceutical company, and there was another company that had software identical to it that they swore ripped off from the company I was working for. And I found myself not liking this individual for some reason. I don't know why. I've never met them, never saw their software. But what it did was it instilled a sense of like rivalry in my team. And that's not healthy, because then what you're doing is you will compromise your boundaries we talked about before, so that way you can meet those goals. And it's okay to have pride in what you do and respecting your company and really enjoy it without creating this entity that doesn't exist, regardless of if it's a real company. In my case it was, but you can have a sort of camaraderie in your team and build towards a solution without going against another thing or another person or company. And the last one is alternative compensations. It's a way for a lot of individuals to feel like they're getting compensated for the overwork they're doing, but in the end, they may not necessarily understand the value of what they are. And that is a very strong asset to that company. So one of the things that I've always said is I had a lot of junior developers ask me this year, which is one of the reasons why I put this on here, is how do I broach a conversation for more money? And I said, you don't technically have to. If you feel you're worth it, you should just have that conversation easily. And they would come back to me and said, well, I did, but they offered me stock or company options. And I go, well, what does that mean to you? And I wanted to ask, and a lot of them said, well, I need money now. Like, I have a family. I had one gentleman who said he has a baby on the way, and those stock options don't really do anything for what he has. Another one said that he took it, and then he reached out to me, I was like 6 months later, and the company sold, and it was not nearly worth what he could have made if he had accepted another job offer. So some of these alternative compensations, you need to think the long game and see what they're going to be worth to you as an individual, and if they're worth for it in general. Because I think alternative compensations are great at the time, but they may not necessarily be for your overall growth. So that's all I really have for these kinds of topics. When it comes to work-life balance, there's a lot of, I stick with a lot of the company stuff, and it can be kind of negative and hard to like talk about. But I think they're important for us. It's like the salary expression, right? Like they say, don't ever talk about your salary. I think everyone should talk about their salary. To be honest, I know I'm a contractor. My hourly rate goes everywhere. But talking about these hard to honestly like self-reflect conversations are important, because then I think all of our mental health will get better. But specifically, I think the industry will benefit from those things. And I think Matt, I'll pass it off to him, but he's going to be talking more about the personal side of that. And I think that his experiences along with these sorts of company topics will hopefully help everyone in general. So,
Thanks, Steve.
All right, I'm see if I can fit both of these laptops on here so I can have notes.
There we go. All right, so today I'm going to share with you guys some of my struggles. One of my struggles is public speaking, so this is fun. But yeah, I wanted to kind of talk to you about kind of neurodivergence in tech, right? So a lot of people in the technical field have the ability to solve complex problems really quickly, and that's why they excel. And so a lot of people don't even realize it, but they have different type of atypical function in their brain, right? So me personally, I have ADHD, and so that makes it really hard for me to focus and do lots of things. That's why I kind of want to focus on that piece of it. So I'll start by breaking down neurodivergent developer. So like, what is a developer, right? So my definition of developer is caffeine-fueled wizard who tames chaos within a problem set by introducing structured, order, magic automation spells, and oftentimes you'll end up introducing more chaos. So everyone here probably knows what a developer is, but that's kind of how I think about it. So what does it mean to be neurodivergent, right? People that are neurodivergent have atypical brain function, meaning their brain is wired a little bit differently. So when I think about this, I think like ADHD, ADD, being on the spectrum, autism, those types of things, even dyslexia. So oftentimes they have some sort of impairment in their social or executive function of their brain. And so for whatever reason, the STEM field, all those types of people excel really well, and so they gravitate towards those fields. And so you end up being potentially neurodivergent or having some sort of different brain function and working with a bunch of people that are like that. So what does that look like in the office, right? So I broke it down to kind of 4 things. So for me, it's attention and focus. I've met some people who can hyperfixate and focus on one thing, and even to the point that if you just touch them on the shoulder, they jump out of their seat. They're like, what's going on, And I'm probably more the opposite of that spectrum. So if everything is going well, I can focus on something and I can, bang out all kinds of features and get stuff done really quickly. But it's kind of like a double-edged sword, because when I'm not doing well, I can't focus on anything. It's like 2 separate people. So like if you look at the code I write when I'm not doing well, it's completely different than the code that I write when I am doing well. And so people with issues with focus tend to fidget, spin in their chairs. You guys have probably noticed I'm like pacing back and forth. That's just me. And it makes certain people uncomfortable, and so I have to kind of be cognizant of that and manage it. But those types of responses are typically due to like stress or excitement. And so other ways that can manifest is with time management. This is something I really struggle with. So I will fixate on a problem until it's solved. And so someone will come at me with 10 problems, and I'll try and load balance and fixate on all of them at once. And then I'll end up solving 3, 2, 4, 5 really well, and the other ones just don't get done. And so that's one of my big struggles. Like if someone gave me 3 days to solve a problem, I may spend the first 2 days researching it and the last day writing code and testing it. And that's just kind of how my brain works. Another way that manifests itself is with anxiety. I also have a big problem with anxiety in the workplace. So how it manifests for me is I will have all these thoughts in my mind. They're very clear. And then, I'm relaxed and calm, and then someone puts stress on me, and then boom, they're all gone. And so I'm like, oh crap, what was I talking about? So then I have to kind of talk in circles until I can bring those thoughts back in my mind. So those are all problems. When you don't properly manage them, they can manifest in the workplace and cause a lot of problems with like hyperfixation. With me, I'm a manic work ethic. I will focus on something until it gets done, even if I've worked 80 hours that week. I don't care, I just want to get it done. So it'll have me working unhealthy hours, potentially missing meetings and deadlines, feeling like an imposter because of anxiety, sacrificing my own identity for my profession, which is, I feel like, a little too common in this industry. But then I'll have a social life, I'll get burnt out, all those lines are blurred together. And so one way that I kind of try to address that is I try to understand what's going on in my brain, right? Because my brain is a little bit different, right? So everyone has like a finite amount of cognitive resources, right? And so you have like this battery, and as you go through the day, things drain your battery. And for me, I try and augment how full my battery can be by doing things that give me a bigger battery, right? So things that do that for me are typically things that will produce dopamine. Next slide. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. Oh, that's a cool transition. Okay, anyways, I'll chase dopamine. So like I'll make time for my passions. I have to like schedule time on the calendar for my passions. So like if I like to play video games, I have to schedule out 2 hours a week or whatever to play some video games. A big thing for me is diet. I found that I wasn't eating well, and I found when I got my diet right for me and started making sure I was drinking all kinds of the appropriate amounts of water and exercising, my brain is firing on all cylinders and going in the right direction. Surrounding yourself with good people and friends, that really helps me to produce dopamine. Helping other people, so like if your peers need help, You know, oftentimes when you help them, for me specifically, it gives me a high, a helper's high. Caffeine is a big one. I don't know how healthy that is, but copious amounts of caffeine.
We'll just say it's really healthy.
Yeah, if you see me at our shop, I literally have like 5 monsters. It's not good, but it helps me focus. And then the other way that I try to solve that problem is by kind of tricking my brain into thinking I'm passionate about what I'm doing. So if I don't like, say for instance, I don't like doing the dishes, I will introduce something that makes me like doing the dishes. So I will put like a Netflix movie up and do the dishes while I'm watching a Netflix movie. And so that's one way that I produce some more dopamine to get me headed in the right direction. Another way is I set measurable goals. So I'll usually set them in cycles. Make sure I'm on the right slide. So I'll set them in cycles and iterate over those cycles. And so those cycles are independent. Just whatever your goal is, figure out what the appropriate cycle is and iterate over it. And the very important part is at the end of that cycle, you get some feedback, right? And so I take that feedback and I am very introspective about that feedback. So I'll ask myself, where was I before I started this cycle? Where did I perceive I would be? Where did I actually end up? You know, what could have gone better? And so I may even write these things down so that I can reflect on them in the future in case I forget. But I'll also ask myself, did I lose sight of my actual goal in pursuing the goal? And oftentimes I did, because I have a issue with my attention to detail. And so it's really hard to know you have an issue with your attention to detail unless someone points it out. And so typically that's where I will lean on mentors. So like if I work with someone that's really good at doing what they do, I will kind of focus on the good things that they do and try and learn from that. So that being said, let's see here. I think I'm on my last slide here, which is finding efficiencies. So development is kind of a meritocracy, and I focus on this because if I'm doing good at work, then I can move on and also do good at home, right? And so these things kind of blur, but they're separate, right? So development is a meritocracy, very much like sales. So like you could have a sales team, there's a sales guy, he's talking a big game, says he's selling all the kinds of things, but doesn't actually sell them. And so like development is the same way. And so like I tend to focus on, instead of like what people are talking about, I focus on like data, like analyze. So like GitHub will track pretty much everything you're doing. And so when you're writing code, when you're doing PRs, all of these different things, you can look back on those things every month and look at where you're at, look at where your peers are at, and maybe that can identify a place where you have a gap, right? And so in doing that, I kind of also think about the things that drain my battery, right? So what are the things that drain my battery the most? For me, meetings. It's the biggest thing, right? Meetings, like I have to change my context for one, but two, the meetings just drain me talking to people. So I will try and limit my meetings. I'll try and streamline them. So if I have a meeting put on my schedule and there's no agenda, I'll ask for an agenda. Once I get the agenda, I may look for action items on that agenda. And if there's no action items, then maybe I ask for action items, or maybe I ask not to be in that meeting because it's not the most proper use of my time. Right? Interviews, another big thing that really drains the battery. So people tend to do scripts for those. Doesn't work for me. I like to make a list of things I want to know, and then at the end of the interview, I will ask if they didn't answer those questions I had. Context switching, we mentioned, very big one. One way I kind of augment that is I push for shallow silos, right? So usually you have a group of developers, right? And then like every shop I've ever worked at has been a startup it's like a full stack startup. And so you're all touching everything. But I found the most effective way to kind of make that a little more efficient is by putting people in little silos. And you can't be afraid to step out of your silo, but if you focus on the things you're really good at, you really do well, and you usually get better performance out of it. So let's see. Some other ways I organize. Making lists is really great for me. Too much process can really slow you down, so I try not to introduce a ton of process, only if it's meaningful. And I kind of will think about that as I do it and engage it. The other big thing is like automating the things you do. If you can automate, say you come into the shop every morning and you pull down 5 projects and you build them, it takes 30 minutes. That's a process that can very easily be automated. And so when you get to work, instead of draining your battery building these projects, you could literally have them built and get going. And so I'll look for these little efficiencies, and then the way that I'll measure my efficiencies is by quality of work and volume of output. So when I'm looking at volume of output, I'll kind of look at my feature velocity and points. Points can be gamed, but like I'll look at how many features I completed that sprint. I'll look at the quality of the PRs that I've given. Have I given people PR reviews? Have they given me reviews? Stuff like that. Have I completed some pairing sessions? And so I kind of use all this to figure out how productive I was for that week, right? Or that sprint or whatever. And so like using these things, it helps me to feel accomplished at work so that I can make time for myself and move on past, I'm doing good at work because development is a process that never ends, literally. So like it'll just keep going and iterating forever. And so like me being myself, I try to fixate on that and get as much done as fast as possible. And I end up burning myself out and blurring those lines, and it's just not good. And so that's pretty much it. The other thing I want to talk about is like compartmentalizing. It really works for me. So like if I'm doing work, I will do it where I work, and then I will leave that area. And so like I leave all my work thoughts in that room, or in the office or whatever it is. I know work from home, that can be pretty hard, but that's one big thing.
Just shut the door. Don't go in that room.
Yeah.
Unless you're working.
Just get out of there, because then my brain goes back into that work mode, and I need to get away from that for a bit. So all these things help me feel more productive, and I'm curious if you guys have any things that make you feel more productive, and if you'd like to share those with me, you're welcome to. But are we gonna have questions?
Yeah.
So I guess in that case, we will open it up for questions.
Yeah. Do we have any on chat?